Okay, good afternoon everyone. This is for my my video lecture for my class in Chameleon Values and Norms for Block A and Block B. Now today is September 30, 2020, and it's a Wednesday. And the lecture that I will be giving today would be applicable for both blocks, no? Block A and Block B. Now, let me remind you that every time that I will discuss something, you should have this module with you, beside you, so that you could easily follow through what is being discussed for a particular day. Okay, so before I go on with the lecture for today, I'd like to remind you that you have to fix already all the assignments that I've given you in this subject. You put them in a folder. Then the moment that I will require you to come and bring your assignments so that I could properly check them all, so you should be ready by then. No? So, maybe I will be requiring the submission of all these assignments in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. It depends on the schedule that we have now. So that is one of the announcements that I'd like to tell you today. Now, the second one is that we have already checked the this one is with regard to your NSTP class, no? Yung group project, which is the fencing of your fire trees, no? We have already judged your your project number 1, and perhaps tonight, once we have already computed, because there were about two occasions when we judge your fire trees. It's not only a one-time activity, so we have to judge accordingly so that we could give you the appropriate grade for your group project. So perhaps tonight or tomorrow we will be releasing the grades for group project number 1. It doesn't mean that we have already if we have already released the grade or your grade for project number 1, you do not have to mind the fire tree anymore. It is still your obligation to take care of the fire tree until the end of this semester. It means that the grade given to you is for the time being that we have to judge the fence as well as the status of the fire tree, but it doesn't mean that we will not be grading you again at the end of the term for this particular project. So you have to take care of the fire tree despite the fact that we have initially given you already your grade for project number 1. I hope that I make myself clear with respect to all this. So now, we continue with the lecture on norms. No? By way of a review, I have told you before, last Monday, that norms are actually, these are specific acts or specific guidelines or patterns of behavior that will tell you that what you are doing is still normal, it is customary, it is acceptable. So I have given also some examples the last time. So when you go to school, there are specific acts or specific guidelines or specific norms that you have to do before you finally arrive in school. So for instance, when you come to attend your class, definitely the first thing that you do is to prepare yourself in going to school, right? So in preparing yourself, you wake up in the morning, then perhaps you take your breakfast or you take a bath, whichever comes first. Then you prepare your things, you call a tricycle, or you have to drive your vehicle, as the case may be, in going to school. Then once you go inside the school, of course you have to greet some of your classmates or your friends or even the teacher. Then those specific acts or those patterns of behavior are actually norms because they are normally done. No? They are customary. They are what we call acceptable behavior before anything. You have the ultimate aim of doing something, an activity or whatever that might be. So the last time we have taken about the fourth characteristic of norms, which is norms are relative. And I told you before, or the last time I told you, that you have to relate this with norm, the characteristic in number 2. No, norms are universal in nature. Also, you have to relate this with number 9. No, so these are concepts, or these are characteristics that are interrelated with one another. No, so number 9 would state this way: norms are culture specific. But we proceed first with norms are relative. Now, when we speak of norms are relative, just like the last time that I told you before, when we talk about relativity or norms being relative, meaning to say that the norm for one group or for one society may not apply to other groups or other societies, because I told this also the last time, that we are bound also by the guidelines or the principles of our own culture or cultural heritage. No? So, in short, the kind of culture that we have will also define the kind of norms that we have to follow in our society. So you cannot impose, say for instance, our norms that we do here in the Philippines. You cannot impose these norms also to societies like perhaps the Muslim societies, no, or even uh, societies in the Western world, no, because these are two distinct cultures, no. So you cannot impose the norms that we have with regard to other societies or other groups or other peoples, because norms are relative. And when we speak of relativity, we talk about it depends, no, on the society that we are living in, no. So that being said, because it's relative, right? It depends on the culture, it depends on the society where we live in. That being said, we go to the characteristic in number 9. Norms are culture specific. No? So these are related concepts that we should remember. Norms are relative and norms are culture specific. What applies to one culture or one society will not apply to the other groups or societies. No? Like what our norms are here as Filipinos, as one community or one society, definitely we cannot also impose this to a country in, say for instance, in Brunei or in Saudi Arabia, because norms are culture specific. What applies to us as a Christian country or society will not apply also to a Muslim society or Muslim country, because norms are culture specific and norms are relative in nature. Now, when we go back to number 1, the characteristic in number 1, which is norms are, we said about norms are universal in nature. I think that's the one. No? Norms are universal in nature. When we say universal in nature, every society has its own norm or norms, no? Why is that? Why is every society following a certain set of norms? Well, to preserve social order. That is the purpose of having norms, no, in society. To preserve what we call social order. Social order would mean that individuals or people or groups of people living in that society or in that community follow certain patterns of behavior that are acceptable. Now, later on, you will study also the different types of norms. Now, universal in nature because each society has its own norm. No, you cannot do away with the norms. No, a country or a society or a group should have its own or should have its or their own norms, set of norms, no? Without the norms, well, everything will be in chaos, no? Everything will be lawlessness. Everything will be in a situation where you could not understand anymore, no? What people should do and how do they behave, no? You cannot already ascertain which one is acceptable behavior and which one is not. So it is just but proper and indispensable that norms should be there in society so that we have our own what's this? We have our own way of evaluating whether a behavior is acceptable or not, or whether an action is acceptable or not. Okay? I hope that I make myself clear with respect to that. No, it's universal in nature, meaning every society or every country has its own set of norms. Because without norms, definitely everything will be chaotic. No, everything will be in chaos. But then again, even if norms are universal in nature, they are still culture specific. It depends on the society that applies the norms, the set of norms that they have. No, it's culture specific and also relative in nature, because culture specific and relativity would mean almost the same thing. No, they are almost synonymous. No, because relative meaning magkakaiba. No, magkakaiba. It depends on the culture that we are following or we have. No? Number 5 would be norms vary in importance. Well, definitely when we speak of importance, norms being important or not important, we are talking about the severity of sanctions. No, when you violate a certain norm, because what did we say about norms? Well, they are acceptable forms of behavior. They are acceptable patterns of behavior. Norms regulate our conduct and behavior, and that being so, that norms being evaluative in nature, that is where we base all our actions and behavior. Well, when you violate that, it is as if society will say that, oh, you've done something bad. No, that's bad behavior. That should not be done by a person in his right mind or in his right senses. No, they will say that. So when we talk of norms vary in importance, we are talking about sanctions. We are talking about when you violate a certain norm, definitely there attaches a sanction, and the sanction that I'm talking about would be the punishment. No, punishment. The sanction, the higher the sanction or the penalty is, well, the more that the people would abide by that particular norm. Whereas if there is no sanction, or the sanction will just be, say for instance, the sanction would just be, say, a little bit of disapproval on the part of people or in society, well, perhaps the importance of that norm will not be as severe or as grave as those imposing punishment like incarceration or imprisonment, something like that. No, so it depends. No, norms vary in importance because of the sanctions that are attached to them. Okay. Number 6 would be norms are internalized by individuals. Well, definitely, just like values which are internalized, once these actions or activities or norms or specific acts or guidelines that we have, once that we follow them on a regular basis or on a customary basis, or that is usually done already, they become part of our system. We internalize them because we know that these are the things that we should do rightly. No, if we will not do this rightly, definitely there comes a time when we might be punished by society or by the law that imposes punishment or sanctions that we call. No, so these norms become internalized by individuals because these are the right things to do. No, these are proper behavior. This is the conduct that society looks up as something that is good, something that is acceptable, something that promotes social order. No, so That's the meaning of that. So definitely, because they are good guidelines or they are good actions, individuals will have to internalize them as part of their system already, as part of their existence, as part of their daily activities. Number 7 would be norms are intended to regulate one's behavior or our behavior. Well, I told this before that norms are actually the set or patterns of behavior upon which we have to judge whether our action is good, whether action is bad, no? Because they are in a way evaluative in nature, no? We evaluate our actions based on the norms that our society follows or our group follows, no? So they become normative in nature. That's why it's called norms, no? Evaluative or normative in nature. We evaluate our actions, we evaluate the things that we do, we evaluate our activities based on the norms that our society or our group follows. Okay, so that's number 7. Number 8, norms are developed as a result of interaction and communication. Well, definitely, we as individuals are social animals and we cannot live alone. So where do we get these norms? Because there is the element of socialization for an individual. We cannot live alone. We need to socialize or interact with other people so that there will be what we call the holistic development of the individual. It's not only the cognitive aspect that is being developed, but the entire domain of learning. So when we interact meaning when we deal with other people, definitely there are set of rules, no? Definitely there are patterns of behavior that we need to follow. It's not that just like the animals wherein if they would like to interact with one another, they just do that, no? By their own instincts. But for individuals, there are rules that we need to follow. There are things that should be ingrained in our minds, no? Especially when we are dealing with individuals or people with authority, no? We cannot just act like the animals without any sense of decency or without any sense of rationality, no? And you will notice that every society has its own organization, has its own government, has its own organizational structure. And because of these organizations or because of these authorities, we need to follow certain rules. And the rules that we need to follow become norms in the end. Okay, number 9 would be norms are culture specific. I think I have discussed this before. When we talk of culture, we talk about the way of life. The culture that we have will define who we are as a people, what is our identity as a people, and what our attitudes, beliefs, our values are, no? Just like we Filipinos, we have our own set of values, we have our own set of culture, we have our own set of attitudes. The way that we live will be what we call culture, and culture will define the kind of people or the identity of the people or the characteristics that a people have that people have rather, no? Okay, so very specific. Now we go now to the types of norms, no? There are 4, no? We have to talk about folkways, we have to talk about mores. You see this on page 21 up to 22, no? So the 4 types of norms that we will be discussing today would be folkways, we have mores, we have taboos, and then laws. Well, let's take the first one.
19, sir.
19. Okay, let's take the first one, which we call folkways. Folkways are actually customs, no, or conventions. And bilang costumbre, no, because these customs have been there for a long time, individuals need to follow them, no? We cannot do away with customs, because these have been ingrained in society or within a group for a long time. And that being so, because they've been there for a long time, once you violate these folkways or customs, people will frown upon you. No, they will uh, judge you as being bad. No, if you violate or you do not follow these customs, you do not follow these folkways that we have in society, well, definitely people will judge you as somebody who does not uh, have the proper behavior. No, you do not have the proper decorum when dealing with other people or when dealing outside or in public. No, examples of folkways, because these are customs already, uh, would be, you see there, number one would be falling and waiting in line. No, especially in going to the canteen, for instance, when there are a lot of people who would like to buy something, you need not go to uh, you need not bypass so many people who are already in line, falling in line. So what you should do is to wait for your turn, and that is the proper behavior. That is the norm, or that is the folkway or the custom. By the way, folkways or customs are specific now. We are talking about the types of norms, and folkways or customs is one type of norm. No, costumbre, customs or conventions. Even if um, even if no one will tell you about this, I think it's already an instinct, human instinct for us people, that when there is a queue or a line before going or entering into something, you need not bypass them. No, there should be no entitlement or privilege that should be attached to you. You should toe the line in such a manner that everything comes in order. No, you need not bypass anyone from those who are already in that line or in that queue. Otherwise, you will be castigated for having improper behavior, and that is not a good sign for an educated person not to fall in line. An author has said that you can judge a person if he is properly educated, if he knows how to fall in line, and that is true. No, why is falling in line good for people? Well, because it tests also your patience. No, it tests your perseverance. It tests your humility, and these are the values that are internalized by educated people, or people who have been educated or reared properly by their respective families. So always remember that folkways are customs, and folkways or customs is one of the types of norms. And being a type of a norm, it has to be followed. No, it has to be followed by all means. Otherwise, if you do not follow it, well, as I told you, people will show a manifestation of disapproval on your part as being uh, or being unfavorable to you, to your personality as an individual. No, that they have put another example, which is dressing up appropriately on every occasion. Well, that is also proper. No, when we go to the church, for instance, there is a norm. No, you need not show some skin, because that is revolting to the people inside the church. No, and you have to go there silently or quietly, because the church is a place for prayer. Or even when you attend meetings, definitely there is a time for you to speak up, and there is a time to be silent. No, these are proper behavior that we have to observe, and this is part and parcel already of what we call customs. No, we go to the second type, which is mores. No, coming from the word morals, by the way, mores would be uh, judging you based on what is right and what is wrong. Now, for mores, it involves ethical behavior. No, ethical or moral behavior, because mores would come from moral, no? What is morally good and what is bad, no? Morals would pertain to ethics also. Morals would entail ethics, and ethics is the study of what is good or what is bad. Now, so here in the case of mores, because these are behaviors that have to be followed also, it is a type of norm, no? Morals, no? And because norms are strictly followed in society, the sanctions will also be a little bit severe, or what we call higher, no? When you do not follow norms, definitely the sanction or the penalty or the punishment may be a little bit severe, no? Unlike in the case of customs or folkways, wherein what we may have may just be, say, a disapproval coming from certain groups. But in this case, when you violate a certain when you violate a certain moral precept or ethical principle, definitely, because we are talking about what is good and what is bad, no, there is moral significance. The penalty or the sanction may be very severe, or it may be a bit severe, but it has to be felt by the person who violated the more. No? Say for instance, the example given there is when you discriminate, no, someone on account of creed, on account of sexual orientation or of age. Definitely, when you discriminating is violative of a certain act, because discriminating is something that is disdainful, no? That the law prohibits, no? The act is prohibited by law. So there will be a sanction in case you discriminate. No? Now, taboos, the next one is also a type of norm. It's a strong negative norm. No, taboo, never do something that is taboo. No, taboo is meaning it's a negative norm, strong negative norm. Do not do any activity that is considered taboo in society. Like for instance, we have eating of pork, no, in the case of Muslims, no? This one is taboo for Muslims, so they do not eat pork. Or engaging in relationships that are incestuous. Well, imagine if you engage in a relationship that are incestuous, meaning your relatives or your brothers or sisters, that is also a taboo. No, taboo. It's a strong negative norm that there is also what we call the moral significance, no? Very similar to norms. And then finally, laws. Laws will always be there to be followed for the sake of social order. No? Laws are codified agreements, or they are codified principles that the people should follow, that every citizen should follow to preserve social order. No? Laws are intended also to regulate our behavior, this to regulate the conduct that we have. No? As to whether laws are morally good or morally right, well, that is not the issue. Morally good or something that is bad, that is not the issue. The issue here is once a law has been enacted already by the legislative branch of our government, we need to follow as every citizen is obliged to know every law that has been enacted upon by the government. Ignorance of the law excuses no one from compliance therewith. No, meaning to say that every law that has been passed, we have to know, and it will not be an excuse on our part or any citizen or individual in a society. It will not be an excuse on the part of the individual if he will say, "But I do not know the law." No, it will not excuse you from any liability if you say that you are innocent or you are ignorant about the law, because in every jurisdiction there is a legal principle which says that ignorance of the law excuses no one from compliance therewith, meaning we have to comply at whatever way or whatever cost there might be. No? So I have to start from there, my lecture. Then you need to read about the other classification of norms, other classifications of norms, and then the differences between values and norms. No, you also have to read that. Now your assignment is, of course, now that you have known the 4 types of norms, we have the folkways, we have the mores, we have the taboos, then we have the laws. Laws are, of course, in the form of RA, Republic Act, but the intention of the law, the objective is the law is there. You need to identify 3 laws which regulate the behavior of a person. I think you could cite 3 laws, no, that the purpose or the wisdom is to regulate the behavior of every individual in society. So your assignment will be to cite or to name 3 examples of, say for instance, the 4 types of norms. We have 3 examples of folkways, 3 examples of mores, and then 3 examples of taboos, then 3 examples for the laws that regulate our behavior. Of course, no, you give me 3 examples. You have to cite 3 specific laws that regulate the actions or the behavior of the citizens in that particular society or in that particular municipality. No? So I think this is all for now. As I told you earlier, I think you have to fix already your folder where you put in your assignments, because anytime from now, perhaps in a week or 2 weeks or so, I will be collecting them so that I could check and give you the appropriate grade. Okay, that is all for now. See you Monday.